people. Today I'm going to talk to you about that group of voters that we call the electors, the presidential electors, in the group that we call the Electoral College. Now, there's a lot of details in the Constitution about how that Electoral College works. And there's a specific statement that I feel very, very strongly about that tells us exactly why the electors were intended by the Constitution, by the framers of the Constitution, to be entirely free to vote for the presidential candidate that they thought was best according to their own personal individual judgment, to their judgment and their conscience. Their decision was the decision as to which candidate would best serve in the office of president. Because the section of the Constitution that describes the presidential electors says clearly, they shall meet and they shall vote. We all know what vote means. There's nothing in the Constitution or the law here in the U.S. or anywhere else that has changed the meaning of to vote. It means you make a choice, you make a decision. The other part of the Constitution about the Electoral College is how they are appointed, and that's the part that the states have used and distorted to exercise control over the electors and compel them by what they call a pledge to vote for the candidate that another authority wants. Now, that authority could be viewed as being actually the legislature of the state, which I believe that is the authority that's exercising the choice. But they play the game of saying, well, we'll let the people vote, not for the president, really, but the state laws are so contorted that when you vote for president, you're actually voting for the electors of your state, not for the president himself or herself. And then the electors go and they vote according to how they have pledged. Now, who they pledged to. Why did they pledge to vote for a Democrat or a Republican or some other third-party candidate? Well, because these state laws say that the party nominates the electors. The Democrats nominate Democratic electors and the Republicans nominate Republican electors, and the other parties do the same thing. And then when you vote, you elect the electors, and those electors, like if the majority of the people in the state vote for the Republican electors, those electors go and they vote for the Republican candidate, not necessarily because they personally really believe that the Republican candidate is the best candidate, but because they pledged. And the state law says they are bound to vote for the candidate or the party that they pledged to. And actually, some of the states now have escalated the practice of imposing penalties and punishing electors who try to vote their own conscience the way the Constitution says. Like I said, the Constitution says they shall vote. And we know from the Federalist Papers and other history from the time that the Constitution was passed, the framers of the Constitution never would have approved the Constitution where it was intended that the states or the voters of the state choose the president and not say that. They would say that explicitly in the Constitution. If they intended that the electors vote according to the instructions of the legislature, for example, that's what the Constitution would say. And think about it. If the states or the people of the states can decide who they want to be the president, and the electors meet and vote, and the electors meet and send a message to the Congress. That's what the law says. They send a message, they certify to the Congress who they're voting for from each state. Then they're just message boys. They're just delivering a message about a decision that was made by somebody else. The framers of the Constitution do that? No, not without some explanation as to why it's necessary or recommended. No. It was intended that the electors vote according to their judgment, their personal individual judgment. And it's a good system because it's a lot like a board of trustees of a town or a city hiring a mayor instead of electing a mayor, or hiring a town manager or a city manager instead of electing them, because they don't want that person to be a politician. They don't want that person to represent a faction. They want that person to be an administrator who can pursue and protect the interest of the whole town, the whole city, and in the case of the president, the whole nation. Now, the way the states have distorted the Constitution, they took the part of the Constitution that says they can appoint the electors, the legislature can appoint the electors, whatever manner they shall direct. So they can appoint them however they want. Like they can have an election for the electors. They can appoint them. They can have some kind of presentation or contest. Like people who want to be an elector seek that office. They could hire them. People could pay for the privilege of being an elector. I don't know. They could use different methods. But whatever they do, however they appoint them, the Constitution does not say that the legislature shall control which candidate the electors will vote for. The Constitution does not say that they will exercise control when they exercise the power of appointment. You just think of all the offices to which people are appointed. You don't appoint a judge or a police officer or a tax collector or any federal agent, the FBI. You don't appoint them and say, I'm appointing you, but if you ever have to make a decision, you check with me, I'll make it for you. That's not why we appoint people. We appoint people because we believe they're competent to exercise the judgments and make the decisions they'll have to take or make in the position they're appointed to. There's one other thing, very destructive, I think, that this distortion of what we call the Electoral College causes. It causes a discredit to the state's power to amend the Constitution. Article 5 describes how the states can amend the Constitution. They created the Constitution. The states created the United States. The Constitution had to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, which is only a few states in the original, when we had only 13 colonies or 13 states. Now we have 50 states, so 3/4 of the states is 38 states. So if there's any amendment that's proposed according to this procedure, which is described in the Constitution, proposed, discussed in the states, discussed by the federal government, discussed by members of Congress, then they go to the step that's the second to last step. The Congress says, here's the proposed amendment to all the states. And within a certain specified time, usually they don't have forever to ratify that proposal. They have maybe 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. And if it's not ratified within the given time, the Constitution is not amended. So there's a specific special procedure for amending the Constitution, written in the Constitution. Now, suppose some people want another procedure, like the states pass laws and they conduct a certain practice for many, many years. So now the Constitution is amended. Or who knows, the states pass the laws and the people accept it for 50 years or 80 years or even 100 years. So the Constitution is amended. You see, the problem with that, there are people who argue that that's the way it should work. The problem with that is that procedure is not described in the Constitution as a way to amend it. The power to amend the Constitution is extremely important and it's unique. Only the states can do it. The president can't amend the Constitution, the Congress can't amend the Constitution, and the judiciary branch, the Supreme Court, cannot amend the Constitution. They interpret laws. but they can't actually change the meaning of the Constitution. They're interpreting what is meant. And sometimes they say, well, what it means today is a little different from what it meant in 1790 because we've had so many changes, technological changes, social changes. We have community culture, community values that has an impact. The government isn't supposed to direct the culture or create the culture. It's supposed to support the culture and respond to it, accommodate it. And this part about amending the Constitution has nothing to do with technological changes in cultures. It's an administrative, it's a process, it's a procedure to amend the Constitution that is very important. It has to be precise and it has to be restricted. You can't say there's many ways to amend the Constitution reasonably. That's not reasonable. So what my position is if there is going to be another method to amend the Constitution, it has to be described in the Constitution. And if it's not described in the Constitution, then it doesn't matter how you do it or how many times you do it. There's only one way to amend the Constitution. The proposal, the presentation to the states, and then the states vote to ratify or they don't. The states have never amended the part of the Constitution that says they shall meet and they shall vote. It's still there, even in the 12th Amendment, which changes some minor things in the way the president is elected. But it doesn't change they shall meet and they shall vote. The Constitution, the framers of the Constitution, definitely meant they shall vote. And if they meant something else, they would have said it. To say that they slipped up and they didn't make it clear what they really meant is a complete insult to the framers of the Constitution and to your intelligence. Thanks for listening, and next time I'm going to be talking about some other issues which I feel illustrate how I think as a presidential candidate. If you want more information and you have a stomach for detail, you can look at my brief or my attempted brief that I sent to the Supreme Court, but it was returned because I wasn't conforming with their rules of civil procedure. But I still have an argument there written out in detail about why the electors are free to vote according to their own personal judgment. Thanks for listening, and I intend to keep in touch and keep at it to let you know that we need election reforms if we're going to survive the 21st century as the United States of America. If you do want more detailed information, go to your browser and search for the John Manimas campaign and then the Revolution by Vote. And you will be led to the URL Real Democracy Party, like one word.org. That's the site that tells you all about the Revolution by Vote, which is you if you've never voted before and you do register for the 2020 election. See you next time.